Thank you all for joining us today for our SmithRx Full Disclosure webinar. We hear a lot from benefit leaders with all sorts of industry questions and regulatory updates. And so we want to make sure that we have a session for you all. And so this full disclosure episode is specifically for benefit leaders to look at the PBM industry as a whole, what's happening and what solutions are coming so that you can future-proof your benefit design. I'm thrilled to have Ty Perry, our VP of Sales, and Vidya Drego, our VP of Marketing, join me today. I'm Alissa Johnson. I'm a pharmacist by training and laid out our clinical strategy for SmithRx, looking to find lower cost pathways and clinical programs. Today, we're going to look at what the market is saying so that we can help you all sort through all the different updates and the noise. And then we'll take another look at how can we challenge the big three narrative in all this. And the biggest thing is looking for how can we really shift from a broken industry to what's next. And that's where we'll go through the next gen of PBM and finally go through the drug pathways engine that offers really great solutions to all clients and members. Let's kick it off by looking at what the market is telling us. We have two experts here today. Vidya is on the road and keeps her finger on the pulse of the industry. And Ty hears from benefit leaders all the time about what is going on in the market and what the biggest pain points are in the latest and greatest. And so we really want to leverage their expertise today in terms of what's going on. There are different things regarding regulatory updates like the Consolidated Appropriations Act, but then other things like lawsuits, even down to TrumpRx. And so we want to go through this so that you all can stay abreast of the changes and so we can address the different updates as well. And so when we hear from benefit leaders, it's an overwhelming narrative that costs continue to go up, and specifically in the pharmacy spend. And so while costs are going up, it's a really hard thing to digest because the data isn't necessarily there. So there's a lot of employers who want to see more data than what they get and aren't able to see it. So we'll go through some of that as well. But I think the biggest thing is that while there are new solutions available in the market, a lot of this is optics, like different optics, but the same issues, and continuing to build on the cracks in the industry foundation. Whereas rather than building a new structure for it all, if PBMs are building on top of a broken foundation, it doesn't really fix the problem. And so we really want to look for ways to improve the industry, pivot the industry to improve it as a whole. And so, Ty and Vidya, what are you seeing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I want to start with just one quick example of that number one bullet point there. New solution and same problems, right? So we've all heard a lot about what's happening with biosimilars, right? And we're going to touch on biosimilars a little bit later here in this presentation. But biosimilars are the hot topic, right? They've come out, they've reduced prices for a lot of high cost specialty drugs. And the PBMs, a lot of PBMs are out there touting their biosimilar solutions as a way to save cost. Well, the other day we were on a call with a group out of the state of Texas, and we were talking to them specifically about their biosimilar strategy. They said they had one in place. This one was particularly for the biosimilar for Stelara. And they were saying that their PBM came to them with this solution, which they were excited about, and said, hey, we've got a biosimilar for Stelara. We're going to take care of it. We're going to treat it. So they did that. And this HR leader said when they went back and looked at it at the past 6 months of data, while they had implemented that biosimilar strategy, what they had seen is that their costs had actually gone up. And they had gone up for different reasons, right? And it had to do with clawbacks and some other contracting games that were played. But at the end of the day, their PBM presented them with a new solution, but the same problem existed. Their costs continued to rise. And so that, I think, is a perfect example of what you're describing there, Alissa.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think I've certainly heard similar stories, Ty, although that one is the most pronounced. I mean, certainly a lot of other PBMs have a more biosimilar agnostic approach or many biosimilars that they have available. They're listed on their formulary. But I think the key difference is that they don't take a proactive approach to moving patients to them. And that's one of the ways that we remain unique is that we're aggressively moving folks to that lowest cost option, not only identifying and sourcing the lowest biosimilar on the market, but actually moving volume to those sources in order for the group to really see that savings. Because just because you have a lower cost biosimilar on your formulary, if people aren't moving, then you're not necessarily seeing the benefit of having that listed there. I think the part of what plays with that a little bit is that bottom stat there. 1/3 of employers lack complete data. And so while their PBM is telling them like, hey, we've got a biosimilar, we'll take care of it, they're not actually seeing the numbers both net out, in terms of savings, but also like how many of you actually moved? How much volume are you moving, and what is your method of actually like reaching out and hand holding a patient through that change to make sure that it sticks. So that's certainly one of the ways that they're kind of constantly pulling the wool over your eyes, or maybe not showing you the necessary data to make kind of those accountability decisions.
Yeah, and transparency is a huge buzzword right now and thrown around a lot, but things certainly aren't that transparent if these are the stats in terms of spend and lack of data. And so, speaking of transparency, Ty, what can employers expect and what should they demand from their PBM?
Yeah, another great question. And in terms of what they should demand, I think they should demand it all, right? Demand to see everything. PBM should be able to provide you with all levels of data because it is the employer's data. It is the plan sponsor's data. They should be able to see it and have access to it. And along those lines, I think it's not unreasonable or unrealistic to ask PBMs to provide as much of their contract data as they can, right? So are they able to provide contract language or anything along those lines with their GPO, right? So where they're purchasing these drugs, are they able to provide rebate level detail, like down to the NDC, right? Like I think employers should be able to ask for as much as they can provide and just see what your current PBM will tell you. A lot of times the answer is going to be no. It's going to be you're not going to be able to get that level of detail. And our response to that is, why not? If you have nothing to hide, share with us everything that you possibly can. And to that point, this is a great quote, right, that came up from the Pulse of the Purchaser survey that goes out nationwide. And the quote said, "It is terribly difficult to keep up with all the games played by the PBMs, and even the consultants can't keep up any longer. We are not served by anyone who is really able to keep up with the tricks." And that's kind of what we're describing here, because it seems with the big three PBMs, if it's not one thing, it's another, right? If they're not making money from you one way, or if they're not raising your prices one way, they're doing it another. And it's just gotten to the point where it is impossible to keep track of all the different games that they are playing and the way that they are manipulating the supply chain, or manipulating your plan design or your current spend to continue to pad their bottom line and make more money there, while continuing to provide you with an opaque experience, one that you don't really have any insight into. And what we're starting to see in the market is that companies are seeing this and they're realizing it. And so now there has been a shift away from the big three, and that's what we're describing here, right? So in 2025, the amount of market share controlled by the big three dropped 11%. Meanwhile, the modern transparent PBMs, right, like SmithRx, our market share has increased by over 19%. Even more interesting is that stat that's on the right-hand side there. So based on, again, on this survey, 61% of employers out there have said that they plan to change vendors or look at changing vendors, go to RFP, and potentially make a switch away from the big three within the next 1 to 3 years. So people are realizing that there is a better way to get your pharmacy benefit. There's a better way to handle your prescription drugs. And so the shift is happening away from the big three PBMs to a modern, transparent PBM, one that's going to give you access to data, one that's going to be aligned with you from a fiduciary perspective, one that is going to have your best interest at heart and really do everything that they can to drive your costs down.
Yeah, that's great news. And you saw me cheering there when you were running through those stats, Ty. I think one of the things that strikes me is, despite those numbers, where at 61% of companies are considering moving to a transparent PBM in the next 1 to 3 years, we still hear. I mean, obviously, they still approach that decision with a little bit of anxiety, right? And we hear kind of often questions like, how's my contract going to compare, right? Or like, what is the track record of the PBM, and what are the questions that I ask, right? Like the big three have been around for so long, like it's taken for granted that there's some amount of kind of recurring like success that they've had there, even if that's not quite true. But they also, they handle every other. I look around, they handle every other company of my size. Can these new guys handle, or these newer guys handle a business of my scale, right? Do I see them on, handling companies that are 50, 60, 90,000 employees? How do you reassure them when they're asking you these questions?
Yeah. There's a lot that goes into that. So let's start with kind of the first thing that you posed there. So how do the contracts compare? There's a couple of things to break down here, right? The first is contracts with the employer themselves, right? So as you're looking at the contract, a lot of times with the big three PBMs is what you're going to see is that it's going to be very difficult to read. It's going to be hard to understand. There's going to be loopholes here and there. There's going to be ways for them to get out of any potential guarantees that they put forth, right? So it is very difficult to navigate. With a modern, transparent, and disruptor PBM like SmithRx, the contract is much simpler, right? Because it comes down to, at the end of the day, if your PBM isn't doing right by you, if your PBM is not doing a good job, you should have the ability to fire your PBM, right? That's common sense. That's the way it works in every other aspect of business. If you're not getting the service that you need, if you're not getting the results that you need, you should be able to move on. And under the big three model, they make moving on very difficult. They make canceling their contract nearly impossible, with a lot of punitive and financial repercussions that could potentially happen if you try and move away from them off cycle. So as you're looking at contracts, comparing them one-to-one, look at that, right? What's going to be, what's the downside of moving on from this PBM? What's the downside of canceling this contract? Now, on the other aspect, right? So as we're talking about contracts in terms of like contracts with drug manufacturers, contracts with GPOs, With the big three, you're not going to be able to see those. Zero chance. You're not going to be able to look at that. They will not provide you that level of detail. One thing that we hear quite a bit is the fact that, like, well, the big three PBMs, they service, millions and millions of lives. So they're going to be able to get better purchasing power. Their contracts are going to be stronger. It's just not the case, right? That's true in the fact that they do serve the significant portion of member lives, but PBMs like SmithRx, who go out and aggressively negotiate with the supply chain, are able to get nearly as good a pricing. And as we've discussed, if you're watching this podcast, this webinar, you know that those rates that are negotiated don't really mean anything, right? They're arbitrary rates. What we really want to focus on and drive towards is the lowest net cost of drug. So we can get close in terms of contracts with GPOs, in terms of contracts with drug manufacturers. But again, we're all about shifting that focus, moving away from focusing on those rates, on those rebate guarantees, on those discounts that are provided in there, and moving to the true lowest net cost of drug. So that's number one. That's how the contracts compare. Now, track record, right? So the disruptor PBM, the modern transparent PBM, we're not new. We're not that young, right? So SmithRx specifically, we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary just a couple of weeks ago, right? So we've been around. We have figured out the blocking and tackling of being a PBM. We know how it's done. We know how to implement groups. We know how to process claims. We know how to do what we do, and we know how to do it incredibly well. And that leads right into the next question of, can we handle a business of scale, right? So a larger employer group. And the answer to that is definitively and resounding, yes, we absolutely can. We can handle groups of any size. And the reason for that is because for the past 10 years, we have figured out those, the capability that's required, that blocking and tackling. We understand how to handle the daily aspects of a PBM. And as we have grown and kind of been pulled upstream in terms of market scale, we have never sacrificed service for scale. Everything that we've done has been intentional in terms of our growing and our ability to handle groups of larger size. So we made sure that our service levels were always at a point that were acceptable to us before we increased our ability to take on larger groups. Now we're to the point where, again, we know how to handle everything. So we can take on groups of any size without sacrificing any type of customer support or customer service issues.
This was one of my favorite examples from a well-loved client. And I think the thing that struck me here, one of our manufacturing clients spoke on our behalf and talked a couple notable things. I think one, their PMPM today is still under what their incumbent PBM or PMPM was with their incumbent PBM back in 2023. So they're still operating today at the end of 2025 at a lower PMPM than they came to Smith with. And that's pretty notable. A few years later, I don't think they expected, with growth and everything else, to sort of still be under that benchmark. So that was something that they were super happy to see as we did this analysis. And I think the other really interesting fact was, what you see shaded there in blue is the savings that they've recouped over multiple years with Smith. And they've been generous in being able to invest that back in their benefits program and enhance benefits for their employees and really share that value. So in the same way that we see, cost share kind of programs and benefit design work in the other respect of deferring some of the plan pay over to member cost share, they've done reverse, right? They've been able to enrich their benefits package in a way that benefits their members. So, really great example of where some of that savings comes back to members and their well-being and welfare. So that was really great to see. But I think notable that 3 years later, they're still operating lower than they came in with. And I think, Ty, you mentioned this, but that's not surprising for a lot of our groups, right? I think they're surprised to see that. But after they're going for a couple of years, they start to see why, right? They're getting 100% of their rebates back. And so in some cases where, those rates may not be quite as competitive, they're seeing the benefit because they're getting every last dollar back with rebates. Typically, we're moving over like largely from a big three, but also from other transparent vendors. They're seeing an average of 30% per member per month savings when they move to Smith, and then compounded over multiple years. That's pretty sizable. I think just even last year alone, in 2025, our savings on autoimmune drugs was a little over 7 million for our members. So, again and again for each of the therapeutic areas, they start to see kind of sizable savings occurring with their member population that continue to sort of build up year over year.
And can we go back to that example just real quickly?
Yeah.
Because I do think this is super important, because I think we need to call out some numbers here and make sure that the people that are watching really understand what this company is going through and what their experience is going through. So when they came to SmithRx, they were operating at $77 per member per month, right? It's a good number. They were doing well. What we are showing here on that blue line is simply just applying trend, right? So if it trended out, where they would be 3 years later is about $103 per member per month, right? So that essentially is saying their PBM is coming back to them and saying, hey, you're going to continue to operate flat, just basically on trend. But with SmithRx, what happened is when we took over, we were able to reduce them to $45 per member per month. And what's happened over those same 3 years is that they've only increased up to $72 per member per month. Again, part of that is trend, right? But they are still $5 PMPM below where they were 3 years later when they came to SmithRx. That's incredible. And that's what happens when you have a fiduciary aligned PBM, one that's on your side, one that is driving towards the lowest net cost of drug every single time, one that is continually negotiating the supply chain on your behalf and implementing those supply chain improvements immediately. And that's what we can do for groups of all size, right? And that is our commitment as a PBM, is to always have your best interest at heart, to always work for you, and to always drive down your costs to the lowest amount possible while still getting the members the treatment that they need, and providing you with that ability and that opportunity to, as Vidya, as you mentioned, to take those excess funds, to take that money that you are saving and reinvest it to build out a broader, more rich benefit. And that's what's happening with this particular company. It's an awesome example. And it's not unique, right? We see this with, the vast majority of groups that come over to SmithRx that operate this exact same way.
Yeah, and actually flip back to that slide one more time. But was, the point that we made earlier on is just so many benefits leaders and teams are seeing their costs skyrocket over the last couple of years. I mean, I think this client was no different, right? Like $47 was their PMPM, like operating PMPM back in 2020. So to see that get to $77 3 years later is a pretty dramatic increase, and a point in time that then they decided they needed to take action and do something serious about it. But so many employers that we're talking to are seeing 10, 15 percent increase in their total healthcare spend, and a majority of that's really coming from their pharmacy benefit spend.
Well, I'll jump into some of the how we're doing this. So now that you've seen what happens overall for the drug spend for the clients, we want to give you a specific example. So if you've watched the other full disclosure webinars, we talk about the autoimmune class a lot. Humira specifically has been on the market over 20 years and just went biosimilar a few years ago. And so that's where we really got to see who could execute and execute well. And so when you look at the industry baseline is around a 40 to 50% switch rate to a biosimilar, meaning rather than using Humira, a drug that is very expensive, you switch to a biosimilar. Now, keep in mind, not all biosimilars are created equal. So you want to know what your PBM is doing if they have a biosimilar strategy and what the cost of that biosimilar is. But importantly, do they actually switch members to the biosimilar? And so a lot of savings in that number, Vidya had shared about the $7.1 million in savings on autoimmune products alone, was driven by switching to these biosimilar products. Now, the FDA classify something as a biosimilar if it's clinically similar. It's kind of like a brand to generic designation, but because these are molecules grown in a lab, they aren't quite the same. And so clinically, they're similar, but rather than costing over $2,000 a month, it's just under $600 instead. And this really ends up being huge so that employers can have more people on the drug, improving access and adherence rates, but at the same time drive down their costs. And so in 2023 there was over $400,000 spent on the brand Humira, whereas in 2025 switching folks to the biosimilar, and we do it well and switch over 80 to 90%, they only spent $155,000. So really over double the amount of utilizers at less than half the cost. And this is where it's really important to be able to see your own data and know what's happening with your claims and if your PBM is actually executing on what they say they will do.
Alyssa, just to clarify, like, this is the same client. So they went from 2023 to 2025 and saw their costs for this class of drugs reduce. That's incredible.
Yeah. And we love to get feedback from the benefit leaders we work with, or whether they're prospective or active clients, and um, seeing what a difference it makes. And so while a lot of the market is changing and drug costs continue to go up, for our clients, because we've sourced the lowest cost and offer it to everybody, it's a much different narrative. And so with this one, the Group VP of Total Rewards shared this, that SmithRx will go and search the best ways that we can acquire drugs and pass the lowest price to our employees. If that results in additional steps the employee has to take, they'll guide them through those steps and provide white glove service through the end of the transaction. And this is where it comes down to, what does your PBM say they will do versus actually execute on? And where it's really important to be able to get those metrics so that you can see that your members can access the drugs, they can afford the drugs, they can take the drugs, and you can contain costs in the process. We're going to kick it off into now pivoting. We talked a lot about the problems and what we want to do for those, but what does this really look like? And so looking at the next generation of PBM, we have to do things a new way because too much is broken and there's too many things that are confusing across the industry. And so we'll go through this now. And we had mentioned before, Ty had said fiduciary aligned. That's a very important term. What that means is we will work with you all to offer the lowest cost options for any drug category available on the market. But how do we do that? Well, it's a few different ways. So you can see the different cogs in the wheels here, where there's the clinical considerations. This is what drugs people are on. Do they need to switch drugs or products? There's a pharmacy network component where going across the whole supply chain, how can we route to the most cost conscious source? And then finally, we have savings multipliers, where what other savings programs are available in the market to get us there. And so in looking at this, let's see it in action. First off, when a patient goes to the doctor and they write a prescription, this is where the drug mix is considered, where our platform looks at what are the clinically appropriate options. Sometimes that's automatic, maybe it's a generic or a biosimilar. Other times it may be criteria or a step, but either way, we offer the options available on the market to make sure that the member's on the right drug. The next is to go shopping and see where can we source it at the lowest cost through our different partners. Cost Plus Drugs and Costco Wholesale are two very important partners for a lot of these products, especially the higher cost biosimilars or specialty generics. And then finally, we look for savings multipliers, and that's where we will take any program that's available in the market and use it to reduce the costs further. And if we take all this and look at that biosimilar strategy, before we looked at Humira, now we also have biosimilar products available for an autoimmune drug called Stelara, which runs almost $200,000 annually. When that script goes into our engine and we look for drug mix, which is a biosimilar that's preferred, and then a pharmacy network selection, where can we get it at the lowest cost, and finally any savings multipliers. What comes out of the platform is Stargemza, which rather than being almost $200,000 a year is only just under $2,500 a year. So it's huge savings, all for a clinically similar product, and offers employers the ability to give these really important medications that work well to all of their members. And importantly, this doesn't just happen by chance. Our SmithRx teams and our technology and the Drug Pathways engine guides members very seamlessly to this lower cost option. That's one claim specific example. If we zoom out to what does this look like big picture, if you're looking at all your claims, we've used the PMPM term quite a bit, per member per month savings or spend. That's where if you look at all your claims for the month for drugs and divide it by the number of members you have, you can see that number and follow it over time. So that's how we measure ourselves, and that's how we recommend you measure your PBM to see where it's at and see what direction it's going. And so with our Drug Pathways engine, because it's a platform, all claims go through it. And once all of them are routed to the right drug at the right pharmacy at the lowest cost, that's where we're able to offer and execute on these significant savings that we showed in the case example. And over all our clients, though, it's an average of 20% PMPM savings. So where you're all probably used to your trends going up and up and up and away every year, because we manage this and offer these programs to all our clients as soon as the products are available, we actually see a change over time. And so we're going to go back, though, to some of the other case examples in terms of how the costs go. So I'll pass it back over.
Yeah, and I think this is a very important slide because this really does speak to, as we've talked about, fiduciary alignment, right? And what that truly means. And us no longer sitting on the opposite side and negotiating against you as a PBM, right? This involves us moving over to your side of the table and being on the same side of the table as a client aligned and fiduciary aligned PBM. So what we're referring to here is like a negotiated cost of a drug, right? And you'll see with other PBMs, that drug is going to remain constant in terms of pricing for, like, let's just say the year, right? Let's say you're in a 1-year deal. So that price remains the same. And then what happens is if during that year period of time, if your PBM is able to negotiate a better cost on that drug, guess what? Your cost of that drug does not change. It stays the same. And what happens is they take that improvement and they keep that as profit, right? Considering it's spread. So they're making money off of that improved price of the drug, and you are not realizing that. And then what happens is you come to the end of your year or the end of your contract term, and then you renegotiate, and they were able to magically improve the cost of that drug. So that's that second blue line that's reduced a little bit, right? You only get the benefit of that supply chain improvement when you renegotiate your contract. And that's just not how it should be, right? As a fiduciary aligned PBM, what happens is the orange line, the second we are able to get better pricing in the marketplace, whether that's through, negotiating in the supply chain, or if there's a new biosimilar that comes to market, anything along those lines, whenever we have the opportunity to save money, we provide that to you instantly, right? So if we negotiate a better discount, you realize the benefits of that discount the next day. If we find a biosimilar or another alternative drug that we can drive utilization to that is going to be a lower cost, we do it immediately so that you see those benefits all along the way. And that is what it means to really be a fiduciary aligned PBM, to really sit on the same side of the table with you and to provide you with those real-time price improvements without having to wait to renegotiate at the end of a term or when your contract is up.
Frequent listeners to our podcast or to our webinars will have heard us talk about our Connect 360 programs. And if you've been with Smith for a while, you know that this is a suite of savings programs that we've long used to help us focus on lowest net cost. Essentially, all of these great programs are still under the hood, and we have helped to automate identification of matching the claim to the right source, and automated that whole process, like Alissa talked about, with a clinically appropriate drug at the right pharmacy and with the right cost modifier. And that's what's turned into our drug pathways engine. So it's all the great savings programs that behind the scenes or that you've heard us talk about for all of the managed therapeutic areas that we've sort of spearheaded savings in. And those are all sort of rolled together in this great algorithm that helps for every claim route to the lowest cost, the lowest net cost. But this is not actually like a difference from what Smith was grown to do for the last decade, right? And Ty, you mentioned that we celebrated our 10-year anniversary just last month. And for 10 years, I mean, despite the fact that we are a modern, transparent PBM, we're not a new PBM. We've been here helping clients consider an alternative approach and focus on lowest net cost since the beginning, because we've been focused on a single administrative fee as our only source of revenue. And it allows us then to focus on driving the cost of your drug spend down. So, from those early roots as a core PBM, really trying to sort of shake up the market and have it think about drug spend differently, to our Connect 360 programs, and now to our drug pathways engine, the path is clear. We are focused on lowest net cost. We are helping every client get access to that. So it's not unique to one client at the cost or at the expense of another. Every client gets access to that same engine and therefore the same deal and the same lowest net cost drugs. So that's sort of where we want to end off on this slide, in a very sort of ambitious sentiment that we're forging that path to the top of the mountain, and it really is to help drive savings for you and your groups.
And Vidya, can I add one thing just to
Of
that
course.
last slide right there? I think this is an important piece of really what you're looking for in a PBM partner, right? Because I do feel like this shows the SmithRx is never comfortable. We're not comfortable saving you the money that we're saving you today, right? We want to save you more money in the future. And so we are always continuing to innovate, continuing to look for areas of opportunity, continuing to look for ways that we can partner with you better in the future. Like, what's next? What's beyond the horizon? So this kind of shows that we started with our core PBM services. We expanded to our Connect 360 program. We've rolled those Connect 360 programs into kind of this overarching drug pathways engine. We're never satisfied with where we are now. We are always looking to the future for areas to be better, for ways to improve, to ways to partner better, to save more money. And I really like this slide because while we're at the peak of the big mountain now, we can't see what's next. We know that there might be another bigger mountain just beyond that. And if there is, I can promise you that SmithRx will be at the top of it. We will find our way there. And guess who realizes the benefit of all those improvements and all those savings? It's you as employers, it's your employees, it's your health plans, it's your benefit design. We will be there forging the path, and we would love to partner with you for sure as we brave the bold new world of PBM.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today. We're super glad that you had a minute to step away and listen to this webinar. But like Ty said, our goal is to be here to help you realize that savings. So feel free to reach out to us. All of us are on LinkedIn. We're happy to chat. You can also email us at fulldisclosure@, SmithRx.com. But follow SmithRx on LinkedIn. You'll hear more great stuff about the benefits industry, about pharmacy benefits, all the craziness in the news, and tons of resources at your disposal on our website. So feel free to scan this QR code and it'll take you to all those great things.
Great. Thanks so much, Ty and Vidya. This is such an important discussion as we help guide the benefit leaders to make decisions that will help their companies be sustainable with their benefits and also innovative. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Everyone
Thank
have a
you.
great day.